this would be the last time that we go back, because it was 5 of us. And when we got there, the Cherokee guy was with us, and I could tell that his demeanor had changed right when we got there. And he was just saying really crude things, saying, let's go back there and get her and stuff. And all of a sudden he put his hand over his heart, and he collapsed on the ground. First thing we thought was, he's having a heart attack, because he's an older guy. He was an older guy. And I was on one side of the car, and one of my friends, Johnny, he reached down to grab him, and he jumped back, and he looked at me and said, Chris, his eyes are red. They're glowing red. And so I ran on the other side of the car, because I was thinking, I've got to see this. And when I got over there, Eddie's helping himself up, and his eyes looked fine to me. And Eddie was like, come on, I'm fine. Let's just go back there and do this. All of a sudden, he did it again. But this time, it was as if his feet were kicked out from underneath him. He went right down onto the ground on his back. The minute that he hit the ground, his body started sliding across the ground by itself.
That's going to be hard for the brain to comprehend that, when you're seeing somebody being moved without muscle.
Yeah, we were freaked out. And people have asked me, was he shuffling himself? No. He was literally taking his fingers and trying to, grab into the dirt. And he was screaming the whole time, saying, she's got me, she's got me. And when we finally come to our senses, because I don't know how long we stood there going, with our mouths dropped open, but finally we grabbed a hold of his legs and was trying to yank him, and you could literally feel the resistance, something pulling him back. And we did the only thing that, there's probably 3 of us that did the only thing that we could think that could fight this or resist this. We broke out in a prayer, just praying, please help us, God help us. And it did give resistance enough to where we were able to get him back onto his feet, walking toward the car, and he was very much drained. It was like kind of dragging him. When we opened up the car door, all of a sudden, he fell to the ground, and I seen his legs smack together and start going underneath the car. And we grab a hold of his arms, and we pull him from under, he's going underneath the car. We pull him back up. We put him in the back seat. We didn't realize this until maybe 15 minutes of being on the road. All of us were up front except for he was sitting in the back seat by himself. Nobody wanted to sit with him. So all of us was just piled up on each other's laps in the front seats. And they said, let's stop at this McDonald's and try to calm down a little bit. So when we did, we was just kids. We had just pocket change, pulling it together, seeing what we could get all together. So we was ordering, a Coke and then maybe a cheeseburger and stuff. And we turned, and the cashier had rung it up, and she told us what our total was. And we stopped and said, Eddie, do you want anything? He said, give me a cup of coffee. And when she rung it up, she says, your total is $6.66. And Joel turns to me and says, you get that? That's $6.66. That's the mark of the beast, 666. And we was all just kind of freaked out and told the lady, here's your money. And when we got back to the house, and Eddie was taking his shirt off, there was 3 marks, real deep, almost like an eagle with talons had grabbed a hold of him, right here and right here. And Eddie had turned to all of us at that point with those deep marks on him. And he said, I want everybody here to make a pact now. Nobody is ever going out to the cemetery ever again. And we all swore that we never would. And all my friends that were involved, because we were at the time, forming our own paranormal team and didn't even know it. They had all dropped out. To this day, they will not have anything to do with the paranormal.
We were there for hours and investigating, and one of our investigators, she was a former reporter for CNN. She was doing just a normal sit-down conversation, kind of like we're having right now with the young lady, just to kind of get to know her before we went into actual, what happened type questions. And one of the very first EVPs that we got was 15 minutes into that conversation that said, get out, I will kill her, the bitch is mine. And it was just like I said it, clear as day, clear as all get out. Like, I remember turning around going, all right, that's not cool. Who did that? Because I thought somebody was being a smartass, and I don't know. I wouldn't think my team would do that, but it was so clear. And so, like, I didn't want to believe, but it was a very deep, raspy type voice, We got, over 27 Class A EVPs within 2 hours of what was going on there. Later in the night, I watched this young lady literally, the cat went down in the basement, and that's where the family felt this entity was hiding, was in the basement. So she, just out of response, she went down after it because stuff had been happening to it down there. And I was watching the DVR system, and I saw her walk around the camera. She went out of frame, and then she came back into frame, and something literally picked her up and slammed her to the ground. I watched her body levitate in the air, free levitate, and just like somebody body slammed her, basically, like a wrestling move in a sense, but there was nobody else there. It was just her. And in the breath, she hit so hard, the breath literally was knocked out of her. And I remember screaming, "Oh my God!" And everybody was like, "What?" But about that time, all you saw was a streak because I was headed down the steps to her. And when I got there, she was literally trying to breathe, but she couldn't. She was in that state of just, she was, one, shock, and then two, she just had the breath knocked out of her. And I can remember, saying, let go, let go, let go, let go, whatever it was, to let go of her, and in the name of Jesus Christ, let go of her. And when finally it did let go of her, it was somebody turned the oxygen back on because it was, where she was able to finally breathe. And, was it because the fact of being slammed to the ground? It could have been, but what slammed her to the ground for that to happen in the first place? So these were things that were happening that we caught in camera.
I remember distinctly I had on a brown pair of corduroys that matches this rug exactly. Oh. Thick corduroy. Back in the day when that was the cool thing to wear and you wore it just to stay warm. And I backed up to the fireplace, stood on the hearthstone, and I remember specifically thinking, I'm standing too close to the fire with corduroys on. But I couldn't get warm. I just couldn't get warm. And my family, I was in the parlor, and my family was all in the dining room sitting at our table, and they were having dinner, and my father was, of course, at the head of the table. And I was looking down and staring at the hearthstone, and the entire right side of my body turned to a slab of granite. And I heard my father drop his fork, and I looked up, and there he was, and he said, "Someone's come to welcome you home." Well, I couldn't move, but I knew that I could turn my head. And when I did, I turned my head, and I looked directly into my own eyes in this facial structure that was identical. It was identical. It was a mirror image, a reflection of myself in a woman whose hair was all up in a bun, and she was dressed in 17th century garb. And she was standing there looking at me, and I was looking at her, and I knew that I was looking at myself from hundreds of years before.
Is that like you're a reincarnation?
Yes. It's in volume 2. That's why we were called to the house.
So,
to tell their story.
How many times, because I know you talk about seeing the spirits in different ages, but it's the same spirit?
Yes, which is amazing. The thing that was so amazing about it is that the spirits that we saw in the house would appear at different ages, which made me always wonder, are they appearing because an ancient memory that they have of being in that farmhouse is so intense that just by them in another realm thinking about being in the farmhouse is enough to make their spirit manifest?
Still yet not putting two and two together. It wasn't until my own mother. I went over to her house, and I was on the computer, and my father, he died in an accident not too long ago, and it was really tough for her. She spent a lot of her time, the first couple of years, just sitting in her bed staring out the window, and that's all she really wanted to do was just stare out the window. And all of a sudden, I walk into her room to check on her, and she looks. Her mouth drops open. She goes, "How'd you do that?" I said, "How'd I do what?" She said, "I was just sitting here watching you walking through the yard." She said, "It was like you was out there thinking, just walking back and forth." I said, "I've been on the computer this whole time." And she said, "No, you weren't. You were." She said, "I just watched you." And it wasn't until just a couple of days later that I was over at her house, and she's in her bedroom, and she starts shouting, Chris, come here." I said, "What is it?" And I'm walking down the hallway, and she said, "You're sitting in your truck this very minute as I'm speaking to you." I said, "You can see me?" And she said, "You are sitting in your truck." And I stopped. I was like, do I want to see this? Do I really want to see this? And so I said, all right, I've got to see it. So I kept on walking. I walked. She wanted me to look out of the bedroom window, and I looked, and I didn't see anything. There was nothing there. That's when it actually stopped. But looking back on it all, I was like, I'm going to try to put all this in a connection that I was in a haunted location. I believe that I may have had a spiritual attachment of some form. I believe the spirit is a very unique spirit that has talent of basically manipulating its features to look like a living person such as me. Why it chose me, I don't know. But I believe it was just a spiritual attachment. After a couple of weeks, like a lot of spiritual attachments, we'll move on. And
what if I throw a curveball at you? What
Okay.
if that was a time traveler? What if that's you coming back or forward in time? I mean,
Yeah.
was it when the same? Well, I guess a time traveler would wear the same kind of
I don't know.
Oh, that's going to like blow your mind now. Huh? So there's another theory.
Hotspots are weird because, again, and we talked about this before, how many of the investigative disciplines that we're employing now are one and the same? Ghosts, demons, the greys, jinn. How many of them are the same? How many of them are being misdiagnosed where you think it's a demon but it's a jinn, or it's an alien but it's a spirit? And especially if you don't have fact, if you don't have that truth, and you know, hey, solid, I know what this is because we've measured and we know it. Oh, this is a table. Is it? We don't have that yet, so we're still pulling at straws and just trying to almost make ourselves feel better by that explanation because we hate the unknown. We fear it, and because we want to categorize a species, we want to bring everything into focus and have it our way. But there are things that were here before us that say, I think there's parallels in all the sciences. I mean, no science exists on its own. It's all connected. Just like you have global temperature warming up, which melts the polar ice caps, which feeds more water into the Gulf Stream, which causes more hurricanes. It's all this one big organism that is all connected. So almost like the butterfly effect, something that happens here is disastrous over here. And if we had an understanding of the geology and the topography and the stuff that's happening with this machine that is Earth and, on a grander scale, the universe, we would have a better understanding. And obviously, we're never going to know everything, but I think if we knew a little bit more, we could, cross some of those T's and dot some of those I's.
Doing your investigations, do you ever use provocation techniques?
I try not to. I mean, I'm not mean or cruel. I can't say that I haven't been a little bit teasing. I was in the battleship North Carolina filming an episode, and there was this part where one of the soldiers had fallen down, you know, like in a submarine, they climb up the stairs from level to level on the ladder. Well, it was like a hatch like that, but it went down, I think, 4 floors nearby the kitchen. And they have these big old stainless steel serving trays that they're original, everything's the same, but you know, where they have the big lid, right, and they heat the food in it. Well, right near there was this, I call it a well, but it's basically the hatches, you know, the ladder all the way down. And this is where the soldier fell. And I said something like, we just turned off the cameras, we're taking a break. I looked down, I go, oh, so this is where little Timmy fell down, huh? Little Timmy. This is where he had his injury. And all of a sudden, one of these 5 to 10 pound stainless steel lids picked up and slammed down right behind me.
Oh my God, I bet you took off like Scooby-Doo, right?
Yeah, running in flag. I looked at my friend there, and we who did that? And we looked around behind us to see if the crew was there. No one was there. It was like 3 feet behind us. So he leaves, and we continue filming. And right as we're doing what we call an ITM, right? So we're talking to camera and explaining, hey, this is our experiment, what we're going to be doing here. So Devon on my show was doing this ITM, and right off frame of camera, we hear this crash. And we turn around and we're looking for where the sound came from. You know, what's going on? Did someone trip? What's going on? I got crew everywhere. But nobody's over in this other part of the kitchen, and when we're searching around, we come across a DSLR camera. I didn't recognize it at first. I said, whose is this? Did somebody put it over here on the counter? No, that's your camera from your evidence kit. This is our camera? What's it doing over here? Wasn't it over here in the Pelican case? 30 feet away, the camera's smashed. The lens is broken, it won't even power on, and I've got pictures of it, I think even on my phone right now, but the lens had paint chipped on it from the floor where it fell. There was a dent in the floor.
Oh my God.
And I'm thinking, look, if this was a crew member's joke here,
yeah,
he's fired. And he just destroyed a $1,200 camera. Right? No one chucked this thing. No one remembers ever taking it out of the equipment case. We had just barely opened the case to start that part of the scene. And it's over here 30 feet away. And even stranger was, I thought if somebody could have chucked this, it would have gone across and probably smashed into bits. It was almost as if, now this sounds so weird, like it almost as if it was picked up, carried, and then dropped only about 3 feet like this off the ground.
And of course your cameras were off at that point.
Of course they were. You know, people are like, yeah, right. It always happens that way. It's like when we film and we have our production cameras, like you guys, these big cameras, and our little handhelds drain battery, goes off, and people are like, well, how come your camera's filming you didn't go? I don't know. They use a much bigger commercial battery.
Yeah.
I have no idea, but it sounds also convenient, and I get it. I would be doing the same thing. I'd be saying that, but that's what happens.
My mom was the first to have an experience. It was shortly after moving in. My dad had taken us with him to his parents' house for the day to allow my mother to unpack and organize in what she thought would be peace. Well, it was during the course of this that she felt a presence, and she thought that it was my dad sneaking back into the house to play a joke on her. He had that type of sense of humor. She spun around fully anticipating on seeing him, and to her shock, nothing was there. So, as you can imagine, she was unnerved by it, taken aback, was eventually able to collect herself and go back to doing what she was doing, and it wasn't long after that that one of the bedroom doors slammed shut by itself, and that was enough to make her go outside and wait until we got back. So that's where it began, and then it gradually escalated into violent physical attacks on us from these demonic entities. And the hallway had a hard tile floor. So oftentimes you would hear footsteps coming down the hallway. It sounded like heavy-soled shoes like boots or something like that, very loud, and it would reverberate off of that paneling. And so my brother and I shared the first room on the right. My parents' room was the second room on the right, and my sister's room is the room we call the back bedroom. That was the last room on the left. That's also the room where the door would open and slam for many repetitions at a time, and that's also the room that remained cold. Even on the warmest of summer days, that room was cold. So my sister, middle of the night, sound asleep in her bed, and something wakes her from her sleep. She can't see anyone there. She knows someone or something's there. So she gets frightened. She's going to get up and get my parents, and something grabbed her leg. And so thank God she was able to let out a scream that woke my parents up. They came running into the room, turned the light on, and she did have red marks on her leg where she said that something had grabbed her leg. So that's where it began with the physical and my sister never again felt comfortable in the house. She didn't stay there long with us. She ended up running away in the middle of the night, 1973, yeah, and married a young man in the neighborhood just to get out of there.
No, because the demon says, no, this is not enough. You've invited me, and now I'm going to finish what I started. So that's where we get to some that's when I get called in for incubus and succubus, because it usually starts out with, well, it was pleasurable, I didn't stop it, and then I stopped it because I got into a relationship where I felt I didn't like it anymore, became more aggressive, and then it becomes really aggressive.
Because when you're talking about the incubus or succubus, that's usually, though, they haven't gone out and provoked. That might just be, that just happened. Well,
that's still a demonic entity, and it's usually there's a cause. Right. What's really important is understand what's the root cause. Yeah. You know, you could perform 20 million exorcisms on someone, which is exaggeration, I realize, but that's not going to fix the issue. The issue is what caused the possession in the first place, and that's really important. Whether it be with a Ouija board, or paranormal investigating, or provoking, or Santeria, you know, someone placing a curse on someone. You know, you've got to know there's so many things. Voodoo, there's the black magic. I mean, there's so many things that you've got to really find out what happened. What's the root issue?
You believe in curses?
I know the curses exist. Absolutely. The woman who was 68 years old, that was Santeria.
So a curse is basically the power of intent. The
power of intent with, for example, if you place a curse on me, then the intent is to call upon a demonic entity or evil spirits to do harm upon me. Okay. If I'm at a weakened state, that what an exorcist will do, then reverse the curse. But it's very, 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 you got to be careful about that, because the exorcist cannot have the intent to cause harm. The exorcist must reverse the curse to cause ownership. Right. You have ownership of that. Now, but that's very stupid to do, because now you have made a pact with some demonic entity, and now the demonic entity has done its job, and now it wants compensation from you.
There's a lot of rules.
There's a lot of rules, but it's just as we pray for people. Why?
Because you care.
Because we care, because we hope that something happens. Now, what's just the opposite of that? If I pray for your guardian angel to look upon you, then you want for the intercession for the guardian angel to come down on your behalf and protect you, yeah? Right. Same thing for a demonic entity. Now I do something evil upon you.
You know, I never took it to that level.
I know.
I always thought of that about, you know, either you're praying for a miracle, you're praying because you want someone to get better, but my brain just never went to the opposite end of the spectrum, which would be your curses.
Sure, and certainly, absolutely. Now, I always tell people, do you believe in guardian angels?
Yeah, I do.
Do you call upon them to help you?
You know what, I haven't, and I heard recently that someone was saying that you have to give them permission. You have to give them permission. Because if you do not give them, that's why I tell people, I've been telling people for 14 years now, you cannot expect your guardian angel to intercede on your behalf unless you give them permission to do so, because that would violate your free will.
You know, usually what happens is the wife is 100% believing, the husband thinks no way in hell. And that used to bother me, because the husbands would tell me these things that happened to them, but it's not ghosts. Right. And where the wives are so frustrated with the husbands, because, you know, there was one family, I love this family. The reason why they called this was brand new house, moved in, and they just had a baby. And they decide they're going to go out for the evening, so they get the next door neighbor girl to come in and babysit. So they said, we're going to go to an early movie or dinner and then to a movie. We should be back by probably 10:30, 11. So they get home, babysitter's sitting on the steps. So the wife turns to the husband and goes, uh-oh. So they get out of the car, she gets up, walks over. Don't you ever call me. I will never babysit here again. She's crying hysterical. She goes home. So the woman, Michelle her name was, just kind of says, I'll let her cool off. So she waits a couple weeks, sees her, and says, what happened? Well, the babysitter was sitting there watching TV, and great big huge house, and there was a toy room next to the baby's room. And she said she started hearing toys playing by themselves in the room. She got up, she looked, nothing going on. She sat back down. She said she started hearing ting, 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 and things playing. So she got up, looked again, nothing. So she went and sat back down, and it started getting louder, and she ignored it, and it got louder. All of a sudden, a bubble mower came out of the room, turned the corner, went up the hallway, and stopped in front of her feet. Babysitter said, done! And waited for them to come home. So that's the reason why they called. Because, the wife had been experiencing things, telling the husband's going, you need a job, you stay home too much, And she's, of course, knows there's more going on because she's home more. Right. So, and that's the way it usually was. And it's very frustrating for the women of the house to go through that. But I'm saying to them, you have to understand, if they can't wrap their brain around it and they can't protect, they're going to deny. It's just nature. It's nature. Don't get mad at them. It's just, that's them. Don't get mad about it because, really, honestly, if he believed too, don't you think maybe it might get worse? So, that's part of the education with it all. But when we went to investigate this house, he didn't believe it. She was, all over it. And, we did our investigation and got some pretty compelling evidence, to support that, it was really going on. And, stuff we couldn't explain. And I think what it was validation for her, an eye awakening for him, but an education for both of them. And that was the best part. And once again, research for us. That was the best part of it. We got our research. It was kind of an all-around deal. That everything's all good, everything's cool. So and I still actually speak to the clients today. It's been more than 20 years. They're divorced, and they sold the house, but I still talk to both of them. And
yeah, there's a favorite place of mine in Tennessee, and it's funny because I did not write about that place in the Tennessee Ghost book.
Oh, more Tennessee Ghosts.
It is, however, in the documentary based on my book. It's the South Pittsburgh Hospital in South Pittsburgh, Tennessee. It never fails. I've been there again and again and again. I went there, I think I was probably the second team that investigated the place after they opened the doors again, and it was just a rundown mess. Through the years, they've started cleaning it up and putting it back into the condition that it was in. So activities calmed down a little bit, but it never fails. Every time I've been there, I've always had experiences. I've always caught evidence, and it's the one location that you can go to and experience pretty much any type of haunting, paranormal experience you can think of, from disembodied voices, shadow people, EVPs, full-body apparitions, things levitating. I've had pieces of wood thrown at my head, flashes of lights, orbs that, not camera orbs because I'm one of those bullshit on camera orbs, but orbs that you can see with your eye, and follow places. And it's even mechanical hauntings. And for the longest time, I did not believe in mechanical hauntings because you always have those stories about, oh, you go down to the train tracks at 1 o'clock in the morning and you can hear the ghost train sounds and you can hear the engines and all that. Well, and I'm thinking, well, the trains and engines and things like that, they don't have souls. They don't have any type of power that I know of that can imprint itself in the air or have lasting energy. It's just a piece of metal. So that's all BS. But in the hospital, the elevators in the hospital don't work. They haven't worked for years and years and years. Yet you can still hear the elevators running up and down the shaft. You can still hear the ding, ding when it goes to different floors. You can hear the doors opening and closing. You can stand right in front of them and hear them open and close, and they aren't moving a bit. There's no telephone lines in there. There's no telephones in the building. But you can be in front of the nurse's station and hear a telephone ring right in front of you, where a telephone used to be.
Wow.
So I went, okay, maybe I was wrong about electronic or mechanical type hauntings too. So, so yeah, that's I guess probably my favorite place in Tennessee. And I, like I said, I didn't write about it in the book, but there's a documentary just came out this week actually called Ghosts of Tennessee, which is based on my book. And we made sure to spend about 15 minutes or so in that documentary at the hospital and do a little investigation and show some of it and where things happen. And we have a little evidence and stuff on there as a tease.
That wasn't the location that you used for your movie, The Hospital?
It was, although officially I can't say that.
So, but outside of there, all sorts of weird stuff can happen. So here you have non-local events, you have spontaneous combustion, which I'm going to talk about, UFOs, you have all this kind of stuff. And if you understand that it's non-local and that all we're doing is we're missing a sort of a law of the universe that the aliens and the spirits and all these other aspects understand, that we just don't understand it, then you can understand what's actually going on here. So you lump them all together, and here's yesterday Stan Romanek was talking about non-local events. I'm sort of dragged into a case, well, I actually got myself dragged into the case of Phil Bledsoe, and I'm not going to get into the whole story because Warner Brothers is trying to get this story as a movie. This is one of the most incredible stories I have ever seen. He's in North Carolina. I just spent time with him. I'm going back tomorrow to spend some more time to talk to him and his son. It's sort of like a 5-person abduction, just really weird sort of thing. And he's had a bunch of experiences, and it's sort of like, you know, and then you see Stan talking about the same thing, that when you get into the UFO thing, it opens up this weird world where all sorts of paranormal stuff starts to happen. And the same thing is happening around the Bledsoe family. And here's Stan, balls of light, shadow beings. So when I came here, I asked Lisa Romanek, I said, well, have you had experience with shadow beings? And she started laughing. Oh, yeah, because the Bledsoes are experiencing these shadow beings stuff. And it's sort of like you open it up, and all this other stuff comes in. The UFOs open it up, and all this other stuff comes in. Now here's the amazing story that I told people I would tell here. This is a fire of a tree. This happened last October at the Bledsoe home, and it is on the internet. If you friend Chris Bledsoe and you go to his Facebook pictures, you will see he's got this video posted. And a number of his kids are very brilliant. They're all in university. They were filming this with an iPad. Basically what happens is they have 1.5 inches of rain in 2 days. There's puddles all over the place. It's very high humidity. It's about 9 o'clock at night. Yvonne, his wife, is looking at, and she's still sort of skeptical about this. She still thinks this might have demonic stuff, and she's not really too sure. She sees these sparks coming up from the side of this tree. And the sparks come up about 4 feet, and then they go like sparklers. They're spinning around, and she says, Chris, can you see this? And he looks out, and up it comes again, and these sparklers are going. And this happens, I think, 4 times. And all of a sudden, in the middle of this rain situation, suddenly, boom, the tree's on fire. Here's part where it ties in that what happened was before that there was a crop circle there was a circle that appeared under the tree. And there was also, you can maybe see them, there was big giant circles that appeared in his backyard. So under this tree, this circle appears, the tree starts to die. Branches are falling off the tree, it's just pieces falling off, and the thing is dying. This is the tree. I photographed this a couple days ago. You can see the opening in the tree, and you can see where the tree had burned. So the fire is going in the middle of the tree, and it's going up through the tree, and they're trying to put it out with a hose. They're watching this thing, and they can't believe what's going on. In fact, the father who lived next door, and these experiences have been going on for a number of years, his father was telling me, I was talking to his father, says, you know, I've worked in the lumber industry, and I've done all this. I've been around for 75 years. He said, but when that tree started to burn, I suddenly realized my son's telling the truth. It was the most bizarre thing. So the fire is going through the tree. This is a sort of a close-up of the fire. It goes up through the tree, and within seconds, it's coming out the top of the tree like a volcano. The flames are going 15 to 20 feet above the tree, and it's burning. So Yvonne gets the hose, and she sticks it up the tree to try to put this fire out in the tree. And the fire comes shooting back out of the thing, so they back off. They hose this thing down. They finally put the fire out, and they sit there, and at 11 o'clock at night, poof, tree's on fire again. Fire coming out the top of the tree, and 3 o'clock in the morning, they put it out again for a second time, put out a third time. 3 o'clock in the morning, Yvonne says she gets up and looks out, tree's on fire again. So she goes out and she said, I'm standing out there, I'm trying to put this fire out of this tree, and I'm thinking this tree's going to fall over. 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to be caught by this tree. The key part is, here's the tree when I photographed it. There's nothing wrong with the tree. It's absolutely a perfect tree, except it's supposed to be twice the height, because all these branches had fallen off. But the tree is perfectly normal, and yet the middle of the tree is missing because it had burnt up right through the tree. So here you have what's like a non-local event. There's no physical way you can explain how this happened. And yet there's no doubt it happened. The kids, there's all sorts of photos, videos of this thing on the internet.
But I didn't remember anything happening. I just remembered seeing figures in the room. And then I got back to sleep and thought, okay, that was it. That was over. What a weird dream that was. And this was when I was like 11 years old, so I didn't know anything about UFOs until I was about 30. So I didn't even get into this field, had no interest at all in it. I knew something odd had happened, but I didn't know what that was. I thought it was somehow related to ghosts because I read ghost stories all the time when I was a kid, but I couldn't see how. It didn't seem like a standard ghost story either. I didn't like see a white floating figure. I saw dark figures standing in my room. And I closed my eyes and said, okay, I'm dreaming. When I wake up, when I open my eyes, they'll be gone because I'll be awake. And I had to do it 6 or 7 times, but then finally, yes, I did open my eyes and they weren't there, and I said, okay, good. I woke myself up. And everything was fine until morning when I stood up out of bed and looked at my arm, and there's that triangle. And I remember sitting on my bed for 10 minutes trying to convince myself that that triangle had been there the night before when I went to bed. I couldn't think of any way it had been caused. There was nothing.
Orbs after meditation, what are those things? They're not necessarily UFO related, but they could be consciousness, or they could be artificial intelligence. Vatican comes out. Father Funes, Argentinian priest, he says 3 things. Number 1, it's not against Catholic religion to believe in UFOs. Number 2, he says, they are your brother and sister. I don't think he's talking about only the gray beings, okay? They are your brother and sister. And the third one, which blew me out of the water because it's dogma, he says Jesus didn't need to die for them because they weren't born with original sin. Now, why would the Vatican say that? They didn't have to do that. What are they afraid of is going to happen? And they have to position themselves in the structure. So this is real. And by the way, this is not gossip. If you want to go online for the people who want to do a research paper, it's in the Osservatore Romano, which is the official Vatican newspaper.
Following an abduction, she and 68% of the experiencer group reported malfunctions of electrical equipment such as lights, digital watches, computers, and 32% of the control group reported similar malfunctions. She and 88%, 43 out of 49 of the group, have witnessed paranormal activity in their homes, such as light orbs, objects that fly through the air, lights that turn off and on, doors opening and closing, Of the 43 that answered in the affirmative, 22 stated that it began after their first abduction. 44% of the non-group reported that they have witnessed paranormal activity in their homes, such as ghosts, shadow people, spirits, strange sounds, and variations in room temperature. Denise states that mail and jewelry inside her home was inexplicably missing, but later reappeared in odd locations. One piece of her jewelry has never resurfaced. Another lost item inexplicably reappeared in a conspicuous location at a much later date. She has also heard odd noises not related to normal household signs and observed light orbs in her home. I have one particular area where I have seen entities, and I know better than to leave an important piece of mail, especially to do with office of personnel, governmental paperwork. If I leave it in this area, it's going to be gone the next morning, and I'll never get it back. One piece, I asked to have it put back, and I found it under the seat of the car. And that's the only piece that was ever returned. She and 50% stated that they have been given a gift of healing following an abduction experience. Denise stated that this occurred for a brief period of time, especially with animals, and it was very brief. She and 72% stated that they are more sensitive or intuitive than they were prior to the abduction. She and 79% of those who responded stated that they had developed new psychic abilities after an abduction experience.